So here's one to make your day better. So mowing, literally left the mower here, and as I heard the stone hit, it shot over there straight into that guy's window. Happy Monday, guys. Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and as you can tell, I've had a fun start to the week. So you can see, I think I've put the video up at the start, so yeah, I broke a window. So fun fact for you guys, in the 5 years that I've been running my business, this marks the third window that I've broke. So the first one was my own about a couple of years ago. I was trimming a verge and I flirted a stone through, and it went through this window. Oh, no, it was that window there, I think. It was one of them. The second window was actually about 3 months ago, and it was a commercial property, and it was my fault through inadvertent actions. And what I mean by that is I had a block paved area to clean. It was next to a conservatory type window building. I opted to trim it off opposed to plucking it out by hand. We've all done it. I did take precautions. I made sure I blew all the area off beforehand, and I still managed to find a stone. It happened. That was solved. The customer was happy. The third one, the one you've just saw, was so I was mowing the lawn, you know, not a care in the world, going through. I hit a stone. I heard the stone hit. I then watched it fly out from underneath the mower, fly across the sky, and pop this guy's window. And when I say pop, I had my headphones on and I heard it pop. I was like, great. So my advice to you, when stuff like this happens, the first port of call is obviously, you know, make sure everybody's safe, but the first port of call is to cover your own arse in this situation. So we've all got a phone. First thing I did is obviously took a video for posterity for YouTube. I've got to salvage something from this sort of shit show, but anyway, first thing, take pictures. So I took pictures where the mower was, the damage of the property, the fact that nothing else was damaged. So pictures from afar, pictures up close, pictures to show that there was one pane of glass broken, that nothing else was damaged, there was no Ming vases in the way, no people dead on the floor. You get what I mean? Because if someone says, and it's actually, oh well, yeah, it broke 2 panes of glass, or it smashed a vase at the same time, or this was damaged at the same time, yeah, cover yourselves. The second thing I did was I obviously shot straight around, left the mower where it was, turned it off obviously, walked straight around to the bloke. I knocked on, he come to the door, he was on the phone at the time, and I thought, okay, and he looked flustered. And he said, what, how can I help you, you know, all that. And I said, look, I'm ever so sorry. So I've spoken to him a couple of times in the past, they're an old couple. I said, I'm ever so sorry. I said, I've broken your window. He goes, oh God, and I could see him, you know, I could tell he had a lot on when he went by his face. He says, this is all I need. He says, everything's going wrong. You know, I'm on the phone to Sky, and while he said that, I could see him talking. He was talking to both of us. I says to him, Luke, do you want me to have a word with your wife about this? He goes, she's passed away. I'm like, at this point in time, I'm probably the worst person to knock on his door, you know, in a good while. I said, okay. I says, I'm going to go and finish up the lawn next door. So yeah, it's not even my customer's window. I said, I'm going to finish up the lawn. I says, and I'll come round to you in about 20 minutes. He said, yeah. He said, if you will. Anyway, I went around, finished the lawn, and I could see him looking at the window, and he's looking at me. And I thought, I'm not dramatising, I thought, I'm in for one here. So I walked up to him, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, he goes, you've done a good job of that, haven't you? And he smiled. Thank God for that. I said, yeah. I said, I must admit, I do apologise. I said, this very infrequently happens. I said, I've been 5 years now, and I said, in the space of a couple of months, I've broke 2 windows. I said, so I'm worried that it's a third, basically making a little bit of joke of it. Because I could tell, you know, he was okay about it at this point in time. So I says to him, Luke, what do you want me to do about it? I said, how do you want me to make this right? He says, I said, look, you can get somebody you trust to sort it, or I said, I can get somebody I can trust to sort it. He says, Luke, will you please sort it? He says to me, he said, I've got enough on as it is. I don't need anything else going wrong. I says, that's no problem at all. So I says, so yeah, I says, I had a bit of a trump card up my sleeve. I says, who's your window cleaner? And he says, Jim. I says, brilliant. So behind the scenes here, Jim is a local window fitter, and also, I've changed his name, local window fitter and also a local window cleaner. So as soon as he told me that, I was relieved, and I thought, right, we can start pulling it back here. I says, Jim does windows. I don't know if he says, yeah, he's done windows for me in the past. I says, are you happy if I get him to sort it, because I know him personally? He says, yeah. I said, I trust him. I says, I will get him to come round to measure up. I said, I'll pay him. I said, I'll pay for the glass and I'll sort it all out. He says, will you please? That's brilliant. So I gave Jim a call. Jim come round, measured up. The glass was paid for on Monday by myself, £160 if you're wondering for paying that size. He then, it was arranged to be dropped off at this guy's house. Brilliant. And then I basically, a few days have gone by. Friday, Jim went down, I went down, gave him a hand. We both swapped it out. I'll be honest with you, it's not hard to change glass, but it's awkward, and you know, so I gave him a hand to do it. Paid him 40 quid, so it's cost me 200 quid. So obviously that's Monday's, you know, sort of most of Monday's taken down the pan basically. So yeah, it's done now. I double checked with the neighbour, is he happy with it? You know, showed him, have I tidied up enough? He says, no, that's fine. Did say to him, Luke, I've tried to get all the glass up, but there's still a little bit. It's in like the pebbles. He says, that's fine. So takeaways from this: take pictures, cover yourself. My advice to you as well, you don't know who you're dealing with when you knock on a door, and you don't know what people are going through on the behind the scenes. So my advice to you is cover yourself, you know, pictures. When you speak to people, put your phone in your pocket and put it on voice memos or voice record and record the conversation. You don't need to be sat there with the phone, you know, or the phone in your top pocket or pointing it at them. You don't want to antagonise people. What you do need is, if ever there's a problem, if ever a relative gets involved and says, oh yes, yes, my dad's told me what's happened, we want to go through the insurance now. Well, if you want to do that, it is what it is. But if, you know, if ever you get a call, well, yeah, you've replaced the one window, but, you know, we've noticed another one, or my father wasn't very happy with, you've left mess everywhere and he slipped over and broke his neck on it. You need backup, you need cover. So that's my advice to you. My second bit of advice is, this is how I conduct myself in and out of business. But if you fuck up, own it. People aren't idiots. You know, if you cause a problem, you sort it. This instance is nobody's fault. It's going to happen. You know, the guy said to me when I was putting the glass in with Jim, he says, is there not a guard you can get for your mow? I says, no. I says, this is literally one of them, 1 in a million chances. I've mowed that lawn now for 3 years. Every single lawn that I mow, I will find. If you said to me, Sam, go and find a stone on a lawn, I will find a stone. You know, and at some point through your working life, your mower will. It's how you act on it. I like to look at the positive in everything. So the positives in this situation is that customer now knows that, so I told her what had happened. She knows that Sam and Sam from SGM will look after her if he makes a mistake, and that's invaluable. You're giving people that trust. The next one is that customer knows as well that Sam owns up to it. Sam sorted it. By de facto, Jim knows as well that if there's ever a problem, Sam will sort it and SGM will sort it. And as well, fun fact, I actually spoke to his gardener, and I know his gardener, he's a good guy. He come up to me and says, I've heard you've had a smashing week. I goes, he knows as well that if ever there's a problem, Sam will sort it. And that's how it's got to be. You know, look for every positive in every situation, and this is one of the few positives that have come from this situation. So I'll leave this video here now, guys. As usual, keep on gardening and have a good day.